I think lots of freelancers work on trust, and that's fine for a bit, but ultimately we do need to have that security.
Imagine if payday came round and your salary didn't land in your bank account and you had to keep pestering your boss until you got paid.
Meetings are great, but they also can take a huge amount of time. What is essential for us to be at and contributing to, and what might be just a nice to have.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode I talk to amazing research adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research adjacent space is where the real magic happens. So hello, I am your host Sarah McCluskey, and I have got another slightly different episode this week. It isn't really just a solo episode because I have got some guests who are going to be popping up in a little moment, but it is not one of my interview podcasts really. This is going to be one with a theme, and it very much fits into the reason why I started this podcast in the first place. I started this podcast to share the stories of the unsung heroes in the research world. And what I have come to realise in the last 4 years or so, 3 years I've been running the podcast, is that includes not just employed people, but also self-employed people too. I have already had a lot of self-employed guests on the podcast. I am self-employed myself, but this episode is going to be more about focusing on how organisations, research projects can work more effectively with freelancers so that everybody wins in the end. And the reason I'm doing this episode now is that it is also to celebrate the launch of the Research Adjacent Directory. Now, the Research Adjacent Directory is an online listing service where contractors can offer their services and research organisation can find experts who really understand the research world, not just generic consultants. I'll tell you a bit more about the directory later on, but if you want to go and have a look at it now, you can go to researchadjacent.com/directory, or you will find a link in the show notes. So just to set the scene for this episode, why this is a topic that I am interested in. I know what it's like to be a freelancer. I'm freelance now, and I was a freelancer as well about 15 years ago, something like that. And so I know what it's like to be on that side of it, but I also know what it's like to employ them as well. And so when I worked in a university, we quite often contracted various kinds of independent professionals to help work alongside with us. I also run the Research Adjacent community, which is a collective of research specialists, freelancers and small business owners. Again, I'll tell you a bit more about that later on, but if you want to find out more, you can jump there at researchadjacent.com/community. And so when I was putting together this episode, I asked the community for their input, and you'll hear voices of some of them in this episode. So I collated all of my experience, all the comments from the community members, and pulled them together into this episode, and also a series of 3 companion blog posts, which you can find at the directory page, researchadjacent.com/directory, or I'll put a link in the show notes as well. So just to give you a bit of an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to be covering 3 topics today. The first one is why you might want to hire an independent contractor. The second topic is how to work together so that everybody benefits. And the third topic, which can often be a bit of a thorny issue, what you should be paying them and why. Now, before I go on to talk about it, there is no, a bit like Research Adjacent, there is no one specific term which encompasses all of the people that I'm talking about, apart from maybe self-employed. But I'm going to use these terms fairly interchangeably. So we've got freelancer, self-employed, small business owner, contractor, independent professional, service provider. All of those are the same thing. I don't have a strong opinion about one over the other. I tend to refer to myself as either freelance or self-employed, but other people, I know some of the people who are on this interview do employ other people to work with them. Basically, we're talking about anybody that you might bring in to work on a project who isn't employed either by your organisation, the person that's doing the contracting, or by another large company. So our first topic then, why you might want to hire a freelancer. And the first reason that I think it's worth considering hiring in freelancers is that it gives you the opportunity to access specialist knowledge and skills. And often these are things where you just can't justify having a full-time member of staff. It's unlikely that you can justify having a full-time videographer or illustrator or keeping an evaluator hanging around on full pay just in case you need them. But these are also things that are quite specialist skills, and to try and do them yourself, you'll either need to take a lot of time to learn them, or the result might end up being a little bit amateur because you're not a specialist in building a website, whatever it is. So by hiring a specialist, you can access their years of knowledge, skills, experience. You might be able to get specialist equipment, access to software, other resources, all sorts of things like that you wouldn't be able to get access to otherwise. And I can pretty much guarantee they will get the job done for you both faster and more professionally. And I'd like to introduce you now to the first of our little guests here who's going to be contributing. So here is Limor Zwi-Dantsis, and I really hope I pronounced her name right. Sorry to Limor if I haven't, who is a research funding consultant.
Hi, it's Limor. I wish clients knew that when you work with a freelance consultant, you are first and foremost getting years of expertise, perspective, and hard-earned skills. In my case, that is more than a decade in academia and industry, supporting researchers to secure funding and build successful careers. Getting access to that experience gives your projects the strongest chance to succeed.
Then the next reason why you might want to hire a freelancer is to get an external perspective. Now, one of the things that is really useful about independent contractors, freelancers, whatever you call them, is that they will be working across lots of different organisations. So as a result of that, they can see the big picture. They also, as an external person, they might be able to see things that you are missing, or they can create a space where you can talk about things that are a little bit difficult. I'm particularly thinking now of past guests in the podcast, Chris Paolo, who said that he felt that one of his top skills as a consultant was being able to say things that no one else feels they can say. And here is a quote from Chris.
I used to joke, it's lucky that I'm a consultant because I can just throw a hand grenade into the room, and if people don't like what I say, I just don't have to show up to the office for a few days because I don't work here. And I'm joking, but I do think that's actually been a bit of a superpower.
Another reason why you might want to hire a freelancer is just to deal with short-term workload stress. Now, I think of this as surge capacity. So if you think about times where there's just a massive peak in workload, it might be an event, it might be funding deadlines, you might have key members of staff off sick or absent for other reasons like maternity leave. And so getting in freelancers can be a really flexible and cost-effective way to get the support that you need without having to go through a lengthy recruitment process and without then having the challenges of having to make that person redundant when you get over the peak, if you don't get the funding, if the person comes back from maternity leave, from sick leave. So it's just a really flexible way to get an extra pair of hands, and that can be really valuable. And another thing that I have noticed personally is that bringing in an external person can really help to just change the dynamics of what's going on, to generate excitement and to boost motivation. Have you ever noticed the difference in how people show up to hear a guest speaker compared to when it is an internal colleague? And it might seem that bringing things like training or event management in-house can be a good way to save costs, but if the result is that people either don't show up or they show up but just don't really engage with the process, then actually that cost saving might not actually be worth it at all. Another thing that I think I do particularly, and I'm a bit renowned for, is getting participants to do things like games which would get eye rolls, because I've been there, eye rolls if a colleague made the same request, but somehow bringing in an external person, people just turn up and do things differently, and that makes a massive difference to how much people enjoy a session as well. Another thing that freelancers are amazing at is just getting things done. Now, I know that you've got too much to do and not enough hours in the day, But imagine if you could just throw some money at the problem and have it go away as if by magic. The thing about freelancers is that they usually don't get paid until the job is finished. And as a result, we are masters at meeting deadlines. If you send us your work, you might be amazed at what we actually get done. And just to explain this a little more, here is Limor again.
We help you get things done. I know researchers are often juggling experiments, conferences, supervising students, and preparing funding applications. By handing tasks to freelancers, important work gets completed on time, to a high standard, and ready for any deadline, taking the pressure off you and keeping your projects moving.
So the points that I've just gone through here are the same as an article. As I say, there's some blog articles that go with this. It's called Top 5 Reasons to Hire an Independent Research Adjacent Professional. And if you want to recap any of them, you can go and have a look there. I will, of course, put the link in the show notes. This next topic is the thing that my community members had the most to say about, which was really interesting. Hopefully that list convinced you of the value of freelancers, but how do you set up the relationship to work effectively together? Here are some top tips, which again you can read as a blog article if you want to. Tip number 1 is to engage the potential contractors early, and I would talk to them as soon as you have an idea. There's a couple of good reasons for this. The first is that it always takes longer than you think to sort out all the paperwork, especially if you have to go out to tender. Now, going out to tender is if your organisation will have some kind of threshold where if the job is worth over, it's usually about £5,000 or £10,000. And if it's more than that, you have to go out to tender. So that takes a really long time to do that. Also, if you wait too long, you might just find that the person you want to work with is booked up. So I generally am working about 3 to 6 months ahead. And sometimes I can fit in rush jobs, but sometimes I can't. Just getting in that person in time just helps to make things a lot easier all round. Another piece of advice is that if you are putting together a funding proposal and say, for example, you want to have an illustrator or you want to have an animation made or a video or something like that, you want to run workshops, talk to us before you put the funding application in. We don't mind, honestly, we are happy to give really open-ended, flexible advice, but we can give you really realistic budgets and timescales. And one of the things that's a real bugbear is people coming to us late with budgets that just don't match the expectations of what they want to achieve. So talk to us early and it will go better, trust me. The other thing on this though is don't expect us to do lots of work up front. It's completely fine we're happy to have an initial meeting. As I said before, we're happy to put together quotes, proposals. We're happy to give you examples of previous work. That is all part of the job and it's completely normal for us to do that, whether or not we actually get the contract in the end. But we do start to get a little bit twitchy if you ask us to do original work, really long, unnecessarily long proposals, go to lots of meetings, do some kind of training, something like that, things that take up a lot of time without paying us for it or without having some kind of agreement in place. And you might be paid for attending meetings. The chances are we are not. There's a bit more on that later. But yeah, so don't expect too much up front. And then when you do settle on who you want to work with, there will be paperwork and lots of paperwork. Supplier registration forms, purchase orders, contracts, insurance, all of that kind of stuff. Most freelancers have got a pretty good sense of the paperwork that will be needed, but every organisation's different. And most payment issues, which are the biggest problem we'll come to in a minute, are to do with the paperwork. So don't wait until the work is done. You need to get the paperwork done as soon as possible. Then you need to pay people appropriately for the work. I'm going to talk more about this in the next section because it is a bit of a minefield. But basically, I'm going to say now, unless it is a really long-term contract, if you're paying people less than £300 a day, you are paying less than minimum wage. It's really important. If you want experts available for the work that you want to do, you have to pay them properly. and also pay them on time. And imagine if payday came round and your salary didn't land in your bank account and you had to keep pestering your boss until you got paid. That is daily reality for freelancers. We expect it and plan for it to a certain degree, but it isn't unusual to have to chase. And we don't like chasing any more than you like being chased. The usual problem is the paperwork, so just do it and pay people on time. And here are, to lump together these 3 topics here, I have got now some quotes from some community members, Russell, Vicky and Sophie, to tell you a little bit more about why this is such a problem.
I'm Russell Arnott, and one of the things that I hate in my life anyway is loads of admin and bureaucracy. And I feel that as a freelancer, the amount of onboarding forms and cybersecurity compliance and anti-slavery compliance forms that you have to fill out just to get on board the books, to then turn around at the end of having done the work and say, oh, you need to be paid by check. Like, I did some work with a US organization who insisted that I had to be paid by check and posted me a check from the US, which I got, and then I took it to my bank, who then said they can't take checks in foreign currencies. So it was a waste of everyone's time.
Get the contracts in place, because actually as freelancers, we are dependent on the income that we receive. It doesn't have to have gone all through finance and legal, but something that says, yes, we are committed to this and to paying you. And so having a contract in place gives us the security that we will actually get paid at the end of it. I think lots of freelancers work on trust, and that's fine for a bit, but ultimately we do need to have that security of there is a budget, we will get paid. And being willing to take on board some of that contracting thing, that actually we may need some money halfway through the project, not all at the end of the project. So being really flexible about what that payment schedule might be. If I'm lucky enough to be able to be contracted for a year on a project, my mortgage needs to be paid every month.
I'm Dr. Sophie Morris, founder and managing director at Engagement with Impact. I think it's really important that our fees reflect all the different things that go into the service that we provide. And I think Sarah's done a fantastic blog post covering that. Getting paid on time is really important, especially for those of us who are managing cash flow and perhaps also paying employees as well.
Then once you've got your freelancer in place, it isn't like hiring an employee. These are highly skilled professionals who have chosen to be independent because they're very good at working independently. The more time that we have to spend replying to emails, providing updates, attending meetings that don't necessarily need us to be there, that means that there's less time to actually work on your project. Give us a deadline and let us work our magic. And here is Naomi to tell you a little bit more about this.
Think about the number of meetings that you would like the freelancer to attend, because the more meetings we are pulled into, which might be really important and really interesting, and we would love to meet the whole team, the less time there is for actual project delivery or data analysis, data collection, reporting, whatever it might be that we're doing for you. It's lovely to be thought of as part of your team, but we're not there as an employee. We are there to deliver something for you. And the budget that's been agreed for that all of that needs to be spent on what we've been brought in to deliver for you. So meetings are great, but they also can take a huge amount of time. And just to really think about what is essential for us to be at and contributing to, and what might be just a nice to have.
Aligned with this is also the fact that being aware that contractors are usually working on multiple projects for multiple clients all at the same time. Not to mention the fact that just like anybody, we have lives. We have childcare responsibilities, caring responsibilities, dogs to walk, houses to clean, whatever. So that might mean that we can't attend meetings at short notice. You might not get an instant reply to emails. It might mean that you get pushback if work starts to creep beyond the original scope. But that is just part and parcel. You get the flexibility, but it's also important to respect those boundaries as well. My final point is a much more positive one, I hope, which is that if your independent contractor, your freelancer has done a good job, please tell people about it. The vast majority of freelancers get their work through word of mouth and through referrals. So if you've got colleagues who are looking for somebody who can do the similar thing, please pass on the details. If they ask, if the freelancer gets in touch and asks you to write a review or a testimonial, it really does make a massive difference if you can give even just a few words to explain what they've done. So we would really appreciate it if we have done a good job that you tell people about it. Thank you. So as I said, that all those tips around working effectively with freelancers you'll find on the website and the blog post as well. And then now we come to the third topic, which is what to pay these freelancers. Now, as I mentioned in the last section, getting paid appropriately on time is by far the biggest challenge for most freelancers. And one of the reasons I wanted to tackle this topic is that I get really grumpy seeing skilled freelance jobs advertised at less than £200 a day. And the thing is, I've been around for a while. I've been doing this kind of stuff for a while. When I was freelance in the noughties, it was definitely into the early 2010s. Even then, I charged £250 a day for freelance work. So why is anybody in 2025 still advertising jobs at less than £200 a day? I do not know. And as I say, I've been around, I work a lot on funding applications. I know that senior academics are being costed into grants at £1,000 a day. And it's really important that you understand the pricing model of freelance work and why freelancers cost what they do. And they might seem expensive, but it's essentially, if you've done funding applications, you'll be familiar with what's called full economic costing, or FEC. And basically, freelance rates are FEC. So when freelancers are putting together their quotes and their fees, it doesn't just include the actual time working on your project. It has to factor in all of these other hidden costs. The first and the biggest one, sucking up about 20 to 30% of the fee, is tax, national insurance and pensions contributions. And then allowing for holidays and sick pay. So people in 0 hours contracts normally get 12% on top for their holidays, let alone sick pay. So factoring in that, we also have to pay for our own office, and that might include furniture, utility bills, internet, paper, printer ink, all of that kind of stuff. We have to pay for our own computers. We have to pay for our own software. We don't get the Word, whatever it is, nothing is free. We have to pay for all of it. We also have to spend time putting together proposals, applying for contracts and tenders, and meeting potential clients. And some of these will go ahead, but some of them won't. And that's just the nature of it. We also have to do business admin, and most people who I work with, the people who are part of the community, are independent. So it's just them. So they have to do their own bookkeeping, their own marketing, their own invoicing, all that sort of stuff. We have to pay for insurance, and if we want to be part of a professional body, we have to pay for that ourselves. We might need to pay for professionals like accountants or legal advice. And if we want to go to any kind of conferences, training, we have to pay for all that ourselves as well. Any kind of professional development. So it's not some kind of scam that freelancers are factoring in these costs. If you're employed, your employer is already paying all of that for you. And so the actual cost of you to your organisation is much more than what you get paid. So that's why freelancers cost more than an employee. And then there's also the fact that even the best freelancers in the world won't be booked out for 5 days a week, every week. So their fees have to factor that in. And most set their rates based on the assumption that they'll get paid work for about half of the time that they're available. And remember that that's, again, you don't pay them when they're not working for you either. That's just the way it works. If you want to have these people available to work on your project when you need them, then they have to be paid appropriately for that. And to give you, on the website, you'll find a table which compares freelancer daily rates to approximate salaries. And there's a formula I've used to work this out, which you can see on the website. But just to give you a rough idea, for a job which you would say pay a £30,000 full-time salary, that will be around £400 a day for a freelancer. A £40,000 salary equates to a freelancer daily rate of about £500 a day, and a £50,000 full-time salary equates to a freelancer daily rate of about £600 a day. So that's why I say that unless it's a really long contract, then less than £300 a day is too low, realistically, given that the minimum wage is now almost £25,000. Now, that isn't to say you will always have to pay this. It depends on the contract. And just to give you some other tips on costing your project, even though most freelancers will use daily rates like these to actually figure out the rough cost of the project, actually it's better to pay people for a project and for a deliverable than it is to ask them to track their time, just because it gives more certainty for both parties. You're less likely to get surprise overspending. It means you don't have, again, when I talked before about micromanaging, you don't need to worry about time tracking, things like that. And there are also some important regulations which govern, they're called IR35 regulations, which govern whether somebody is freelance or employed. And if you're paying people on a project basis for a particular deliverable, you're much less likely to fall foul of the IR35 regulations. When you might pay either a bit more or a bit less than these rates that I've said, the thing you'll pay more for definitely is rush jobs. So if you go to somebody and say, I need this next week, then you will pay more for that, because that's the equivalent of overtime, and they might need to actually do essentially work outside their normal hours to get it done, or delay other jobs to get it done. So that's the freelance equivalent of overtime. Also, as with any industry, you will pay more for people who have got years and years of experience, or who have got really specialist skills that are really hard to get elsewhere, and you'll pay more for them. But you can pay less, you can expect to pay less if you can offer a longer contract or what's called a retainer. Now, a retainer is when you agree to pay somebody for, say, a couple of days' work every month, or something like that, on an ongoing basis. And that's because income uncertainty is one of the things that pushes up freelancer rates. So if you can offer more certainty, then you will usually get lower rates in return for that. And the last thing about costing your project is make sure you factor in expenses and meetings. If you're going to expect the freelancer to travel as part of the contract, stay away from home, buy lots of materials, particularly up front, attend lots of meetings, then you need to factor that into the budget. So hopefully that is a useful guide to what to pay freelancers, and it will have laid the foundations for you to get some brilliant freelancers on board to support your projects. But I know the question now is, where do I find these brilliant freelancers who are available? And how do you know they're going to do a good job? As I say, one of the ways you know they're going to be a good job is by asking for referrals from people that you know, or looking at some of that social proof. So that's why it's really important to help to share that for the people that you've worked with who are good. But I often recount the story of how when I was employed, we paid for some copywriting, which despite everyone's best efforts, and I'm not criticising the agency, we ended up with it being unusable because they were a student recruitment comms agency that the university used, and they just didn't understand research. But I knew from the work that I'd been doing that there were lots of brilliant specialist freelancers out there who do understand research. And I wanted to come up with a way that would help to match up research projects and these specialist contractors. I created the Research Adjacent Directory. And the Research Adjacent Directory is a listing site where freelancers and small businesses can post their services, and research organisations can go and browse through and find the sort of help that they are looking for. So you can search by keywords. So for example, if you wanted an illustrator, you might type that in. Or you can filter by location or the particular type of expertise you're looking for. Say you need somebody to help with evaluation or impact or something like that. You can filter by that as well. And the listings at the moment include specialists in communication, evaluation, coaching, events, training, facilitation, knowledge exchange, impact, Basically, if it's research adjacent, we have got it. And at the moment, if you go and have a look at the site, there's about 20 listings there with my wonderful group of pioneers who are willing to take a chance on this. But I'm hoping as word gets out, I'm pretty confident that this will grow. So you can check out the directory at researchadjacent.com/directory. And if you're listening to this as a current or budding freelancer, you might be wondering how to get your services listed in the directory. The answer is to come and join the Research Adjacent community. You've heard from a few people in the community today. I've mentioned them as we go along. And getting a directory listing is a perk of community membership. As part of community membership, you also get access to a private online community where we've got an opportunities board, chat board, and lots of resources, little videos and things as well to help you to run your business. And we have a monthly online catch-up call and even occasional in-person catch-ups. And I'm going to meet one of my fellow community members just on Wednesday this week. Yeah, so that's fab. You can find out more about the community at researchadjacent.com/community. Bit of a theme there with the naming. I know there's been a lot of information in this episode. I feel like I've been talking for quite a long time. I will put links in the show notes to the blog post that I mentioned, as well as the directory and the community. And if you do have any feedback on the directory, if you go and check it out, please do let me know. I have been working away at it in the background for nearly a year now. So I am genuinely thrilled to birth it out into the world and share it with you. It does feel like it has been a long time coming. So if you've got feedback, you just find me on social media, or you can send an email to hello@researchadjacent.com. Huge thanks to the community members who contributed to this episode, to Russell, Limor, Vicky, Naomi and Sophie. And a big thanks to everybody who has joined the community over the last year for putting their faith in me to create something out of what started as the spark of an idea last autumn. If you are even slightly interested, please do come and check out the community. It is full of the most fantastic people, and our monthly Zoom calls are absolutely one of my favourite things to do. So we are, again, researchadjacent.com/community. And I want to finish this episode with this quote from Sophie, which didn't quite fit into any of the other sections, but it is a reminder that in the end, it's all about people. People connecting with each other, being kind and treating each other in the way that we would want to be treated. And that's the bottom line, really. Take it away, Sophie.
We're humans. We love to smile. We love to connect on a deeper, more personal level. I'm talking cats, dogs, children. We love talking about all these things too. And I try to bring as much of that as I can to my business. That's the human, that's the me behind the business. And we love to hear those things from you too, to build deep and meaningful connections.
Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. If you're listening in a podcast app, please check you're subscribed and then use the links in the episode description to find full show notes and to follow the podcast on LinkedIn or Instagram. You can also find all the links and other episodes at www.researchadjacent.com. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and the theme music is by Lemon Music Studios on Pixabay. And you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.